You're listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for letting me share part of your day. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. Probably being remotely supervised as Myra's working. And I've kind of chuckled myself up here a little bit. I joke a lot about Myra supervising me, or at least remotely supervising me, because I do tend to get off on some tangents every once in a while, as she likes to keep me on track. I put notes together, and sometimes I veer off of those, and sometimes I don't. When I have a lot of something I need to get, make sure everything's on track, is when she does her best work. But she's been keeping me on track for about 30 years now, so hopefully she will be listening. If you happen to be listening live, you can join the chat. It is open. If you are listening to this later, you can also leave a comment if you'd like. All it takes is a very free account, and you can leave a comment. I need to remind everyone with the upcoming gift giving season, books make a wonderful gift. There's a couple of them out there already that I would hopefully encourage you to pick up. God's Universe, God's Rules, and Tradition to Truth are a couple that you might be interested in. Hopefully they will be a blessing to you. The other thing I need to remind you of is don't forget those likes and share buttons. We put this out free. Somebody else has paid for it, so you don't have to. But if you use those likes and shares, it just kind of builds our notices up. People notice you more. You climb to the top of the rankings and the pages and all those good things where they keep track and keep score. More on that later, possibly. The other thing I was going to mention, the news this week is interesting. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I'm just going to say, watch your news. If you are so inclined to watch world news, watch your news, and I want you to think about some things that Isaiah had to say, some things that Jeremiah had to say, and it looks like we're coming up on some things that Zechariah had to say. So keep those prophets in mind as you watch your news. So, that warning being offered, let me dive into what I want to spend some time on today. Now, last week, if you happen to listen on Thursday, we talked about how people should not try to force something onto someone that is going to do them harm. I'm not really going into the whole vaccine thing here, right? But I could very easily. But what I was saying was, you don't force something harmful onto someone for the specific purpose then of being able to put yourself in a position to help them, right? You're not going to feed bad weeds or bad feed to a sheep so that you can then turn around and give them medicine and say, oh, aren't I this lovely person because I helped this animal, right? A pastor's not going to give his congregation bad advice so that he can then turn around and say, well, I have a solution for you. If that's the kind of pastor that you're sitting under, you should probably find a different pastor, right? So I delivered that message, and it's still good. I still agree with all of it, and I didn't realize how important it was until the next morning. Now, the next morning, I was drinking my coffee, and I was looking through the news of the day from the various sites that I get my news from, and I read a letter to the editor in a local newspaper, and it was about something that a local church was proposing to do. I'm going over this and going over this and going over this, and I thought, this just isn't right. This isn't the way we act as believers. And I'm going to go into more on that in a few minutes. But before I get to that, let's look at something Paul wrote in Romans. Romans 11, 16 through 21. In the first place, I got ahead of myself again. I'm sorry, folks. Romans 11, 16 to 21. If the first piece of bread is offered to God, then the whole loaf is made holy. If the roots of a tree are holy, then the tree's branches are holy too. Some of the branches from an olive tree have been broken off, and the branch of a wild olive tree has been joined to the first tree. You non-Jews are the same as that wild branch, and you now share the strength and the life of the first tree, the children of Abraham. So don't brag about those branches that were broken off. You have no reason to brag. Why? You do not give life to the root. The root gives life to you. You will say, branches were broken off, so I could be joined to their tree. That may be true. But those branches were broken off because they did not believe. And you continue to be part of the tree only because you believe. Don't be proud. Be afraid. Paul's reminding the Romans who they are. They're a wild olive branch that has been grafted in. The Romans had gotten prideful. They were going the wrong direction. They were actually headed towards polytheism very quickly. And Paul is warning them, no, you don't feed the tree. You don't feed the root feeds you. Now, Paul's getting his advice from a familiar source. He was getting his advice from David. Paul understood that the root, the Hebrew people, some of them have rejected the Creator, and they were no longer part of the tree, as he's explaining it. But Paul's saying that there's room for new believers to join. But you have to know, you have to understand that when you're grafted in, let me explain something about being grafted. If you take an apple tree and you put a limb of a pear tree, you graft it in, it's possible to do that. And the branch of the pear tree is still going to grow pears, while the rest of the tree will grow apples. Paul's saying you don't get your strength, you don't get your feed, you don't get your nourishment to give to the tree. The tree gathers its nourishment to give to you so that you can still do what you're doing. You don't magically become an apple, if you're a wild olive grafted into a natural olive or a domesticated olive, you don't magically become domesticated. You're still wild. But the difference is, now you're part of, you have joined with, you have come together to be part of the whole. Isn't that amazing? David understands this. And as we look about being boastful, being prideful, being something we are not, being something other than what we are, being something other than what we should be, it's amazing what David has to say. If we look at a couple of places, Psalm 75:4 begins, I say to the boastful, do not boast. You know, that's kind of like saying, I'm going to use this example. That's like saying to Donald Trump, don't be a blowhard, right? Don't brag about yourself. He's always going to brag about himself. He is a person who is very, very bold. He knows he's accomplished a lot. He realizes that, and he uses that persona out in public. I am told by people who know him that he's actually a very humble person. But his persona, his public persona, is that he's out there as a blowhard. David writes, I say to the boastful, do not boast. In Psalm 74, just before Psalm 75, verse 21, here's something you might not expect. Do not let the oppressed turn away in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Now, believe it or not, the word for boast in Psalm 75 is the exact same word as praise in Psalm 74. Same word used for boast is used for praise. And here's something that will really surprise you. Are you ready for this? We get the word hallelujah from the Hebrew word that's translated as boast and praise. It's Strong's number 1984, if you're keeping score. The word halal, okay, actually means to shine. You're going to cause something to shine. You're going to polish it up so it's bright and shiny. You're going to recognize it. You're going to be proud of it. You're going to brag about it. You're going to boast on it. You're going to give it praise. Now, when the word is used to describe the things of our Creator, let me say this again. When that word is used to describe the things of our Creator, whether it's actually the Creator or something He has done, we brag about it. We boast about it. When the word is, the word should give us the impression. If you look back at the Hebrew letters of the word, it should give us the impression that our spirit is bound to the teachings and the instructions of our Creator. That's basically what the word means. So when we think about that word and we look at it and it's something that the Almighty has done, we think about boasting about Him. We think about praising Him. We think about those kind of things. But when it's something that we have done, it's always used in the negative. It always has a negative context. When we reflect that light, when it shines on us, when we're the ones shining our own light on us, it's always in a negative context. However, when we are shining the light on something that the Almighty has done or on the Almighty Himself, we can brag about that. It's always in a positive context. Always a positive emotion. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Now, haughty means high-handed, right? Like arrogant. It's an arrogant transference of joy. In other words, let's say it this way. If you do something for somebody, or if you do something and somebody knows you did it and they are full of joy, right? You should be joyful because you're seeing somebody else full of joy. But a haughty spirit means that you have seen their joy, and now you're reflecting it negatively back on yourself. You're stealing their joy. Do you see how that works? I hope I explained that right. I'm not here. Myra's not here for me to ask her. You know, it's kind of like stealing somebody's happiness. If you do something and it brings joy to someone, and you look at that and you say, "Oh, I should be so proud of myself. I should look what I've done. Aren't I the most wonderful person in the world? Look what I have done." That comes back as a negative emotion, a negative feeling on you, because now you're stealing their happiness. You're feeding off of that other person. And that kind of leads me back to this church that I mentioned earlier. Now, I happen to know this church very well. I know a lot of the people that go there. I stopped by there, I think it was on Friday, and I was going to ask some folks about this, but there was nobody there who would have been able to answer my questions. There was none of the leadership there. And I would rather hear from the leadership than the gossip from the people. I know that sounds a little harsh, but I like to go to the source. What this church has done, and it has become a bad situation in the area where they're located. Now, I don't live near there. I'm quite a ways away from there. So the concept of not in my backyard really doesn't fit. You know, it doesn't matter to me that it's, you know, a 10 or 15 minute drive that it takes me to get there. So, you know, for me to say not in my backyard, that's not what I'm talking about. This goes much deeper than that. What this church wants to do, and I think they were approached by a secular organization. Excuse me. They want to fence in an area. And in this fenced in area, they want to erect these aluminum, I think they're called pallet sheds. And they are 64 square feet, which is, if you're listening in the United States, it's 8 by 8. It's just under 6 square meters if you're in the metric system, folks, which is like 2.4 meters by 2.4 meters, somewhere in that area. Oh, Meyer just chimed in. So here we have this church who wants to fence in an area of their property, and they want to put 40 of these little, for lack of a better description, tin shacks, okay? And they want to house homeless folks in there. But there's a problem with this. Now, the problem is not that they want to help people. That is wonderful. Don't have an issue there. We are supposed to help people. But what they are creating, and I'm just going to come right out and say this, what they're creating is a concentration camp, okay? That's all you can say. What they are creating is a concentration camp. They think if they move someone from the stereotypical cardboard box into a tin shack, they can magically help people. Well, the problem is in this encampment, there's going to be no running water. So your sanitary conditions are going to be very poor. How's that helping anyone? What does that do? There's not going to be any professional medical or professional counseling type folks there. They're just housing people in a concentration camp. I thought that was kind of outlawed by the Nuremberg Code, but maybe I'm mistaken about that. You know, think about this. Think about this. Does it sound like a project that a church should even consider being involved with? If we look around the world and we see these places, in the American mind, it just looks atrocious to us. Now, where Myra grew up was a very poor country when she was there. It has since, thankfully, been upgraded considerably in a lot of places. There's still some very poor areas. We have lived in the United States in some poor areas. To think that someone can project their concept and their idea of what is appropriate onto another person, number one, is inappropriate. Number two, it's not biblical. And for some reason, they think that they can look at someone and say, you shouldn't be in the situation you're in. Well, it doesn't work like that. Some of the homeless people are quite content to be in that situation. Now, there are a few of these folks who, let's just say it this way, they enjoy the freedom of being homeless. In the United States, many, many years ago, well, not that many years ago, there were what we called the Hobos. These folks would, if the weather was getting cold, they would hop on a train without purchasing a ticket, and they would ride that train to a warmer climate where, they might go find a job, right, so that they could purchase whatever necessities they needed, but they would stay out, in their little camps sometimes. Sometimes they would be by themselves, and they would be by themselves out there. It was a lifestyle that they adapted to. They enjoyed it. Some of the homeless we see today are like that. Some of them are living off of income, so they don't even have to, go. They don't even have to go find a job. They have a limited amount of income or a source of income. Some of them quite a bit because they're not spending any money on anything. But they have this income every month. All they need is to go to, they'll go get cleaned up a little bit, go to a bank, get whatever cash they want so that they can continue their lifestyle. That is one small sector of the homeless population that we see. There is another small sector of the homeless population that we see that are affected because for some reason, whether it is through illness, whether it is through displacement, whether it is through abuse, whatever it happens to be, they have become homeless and don't want to be. So they're in what they hope is a very temporary situation. Now the problem is instead of making sure that that subgroup of people get the proper help they need, all this project does is house them in a situation that is not helpful. They don't have access to training. They don't, and when I say training, I don't mean just like job training to go find a new job. I'm talking about managing a household, because they don't teach that in our public schools anymore. When I was in school, they had a home ec class. And in that home ec class, you were expected to learn how to do things like manage a household budget. You were expected to know how to cook food properly so it didn't hurt you when you ate it. You know, those were the kind of things that they used to teach in school that they don't teach anymore. Now they teach other things, like how to hate your neighbor. Think about that. That's what's going on in American school systems. But today, people have to be expected to learn how to do that on their own. Some people can't do that. You have to know how to manage not only your money, you have to know how to manage your time. Time management, when I was managing people, that was one of the biggest problems I had with folks. They didn't know how to properly manage their time. And so their jobs were taking much longer than they needed to. You know, if you're working in someone's house and you need something out of the truck, you make sure when you go to the truck, you get the other stuff you need for the next, as long as the job that you're working on requires. So, you know, when you get there, you're like, oh, I should have had, I've got to go back down and I got to get something else out of the truck. Oh, I should have got, you know how that works, right? Drives me up a wall when I see people mismanaging their time that way. They look busy, but they're not productive. Let's put it that way. Another aspect of why this is such a bad idea, this has been used and the system has been abused around the world, right? Because all you're doing is taking a segment of society, you're lumping them all together. You think that because one or two people are like this, everybody's like this, so you lump them all together, and you wonder why they don't get along, why you have people who want to leave that particular situation. It's because they're not there to fit in to start with. Instead of getting to the root of why somebody might be in a situation they're in, you know, and I've mentioned just a couple. I have mentioned just a couple. Think about this. There are people who are, and I'm going to stay with the homeless because that's what we're talking about. There are people in the homeless situation today, some because they want to be, some because they don't want to be, some because they realize that they can go through life without having to do anything. They're perfectly content letting somebody else take care of them. Some people are like this, and I have a relative whose in-law this happened to. They were in an addiction and didn't want out of the addiction. So they were homeless to the point living in one of these type of situations where that addiction was allowed to continue instead of giving them the help they needed and convincing them that lifestyle was going to be destructive. They were allowed to continue in their destructive addiction until they died. It's that simple. It's that simple. There was no help offered. And that's what happens in these places. We try to warehouse the worst of society, as I've heard it said. And what we wind up doing is putting these folks in a situation they can't get out of, because we're not offering them the real help they need. You know, if you look at Deuteronomy 15, and it begins in verse 7, it says that you're supposed to open your hand to your brother, to your kinsman, to your countryman. And in verse 8 it says you give them what they need. It doesn't say you give them what they want. It says you give them what they need. If they need to not be in one of these situations, maybe the best thing you can say is no. We don't offer that help to you. Go find it somewhere else. If what they want is to be enabled to continue in a situation so that they can continue to feed off of the charity of others, sometimes the best thing you can say to them is no. This isn't the right place for you. If they think that they want to continue in their destructive lifestyle, the best thing you can do for those kinds of people is say, let us give you the help you need. And if you don't want to participate in the help you need, well then maybe we aren't the ones who need to be helping you. And eventually what you're going to find, if you talk to enough of these people, if you engage one-on-one with enough of these people, what you're going to find is that there is going to be those people that you can help. Because they're going to say to you, I don't want to be here. I need to know how to manage my time. I need to know how to manage my family's budget. I need to know that I can go to work for somebody who's actually going to be dependable enough that they're going to pay me. You know, one of the things that I learned when I was out west when we were working, and I was looking for a job. I remember this because the look on somebody's face when I said this. I said, look, when we were talking back and forth, and they said, you know, well, how much do you require to live on? And I said, just give us room and board and then pay me what I'm worth. Just pay me what I'm worth. Now, that does something. That says to the employer, this person is going to work very, very hard because they want the most they can get. And I've had a couple of people come back and say, well, you know, I can't pay you what you're worth because what you're worth is a lot more than what I can pay you. I've had some other people say, well, you know, that's not how we work here. That's not how we do things. And that's fine. Probably didn't want to work for them anyway. But when it comes to actually helping people, what we have to learn to do is to recognize the need. We got to get out of this. We have to get, I'm almost going to say something I don't want to say, but we've got to get out of this ignorant mentality that everyone is lumped all together. I don't really want to use the word racist here, but it's a good example. It's a good analogy. If you see a encampment of homeless folks and you lump all of them together in one stereotype, I don't care if they're black, white, yellow, purple Martians. It doesn't matter to me. If you lump them all together, you're a racist. I'm going to put it out there for you. You know, and I don't care what color you are when you say that either. If you look at a group of people who may be less fortunate than you, and I'm going to say this, not every homeless person I know is less fortunate than some rich people I know. Okay? I've met a couple of homeless folks who are far more content and far more happy than some rich people I know. But if you look at a group that you think is less fortunate than you, and you lump them all together, that is racist because you're being prejudiced to the point where you're looking at a group and you're saying the group is less than the individual. I should say the group is worth less than the individual. What you should be doing, what we've got to learn how to do, is engage people one-on-one. Find out what their need is. If you are capable of helping, not what they want, but what they need, if you're capable of giving them what they need, then offer it to them. If they don't want what they need, and they only want what they want, you can't help them. It's impossible to help someone who doesn't choose to be helped. If what they want is to maintain a destructive lifestyle, there's no help. And I want you to think about that, believers. Think about that. If the Almighty Creator Himself offers you something, He offers to bless you with the greatest blessing, and you reject it, there's no way He can help you. It's impossible. But if you're willing to accept it, how many more blessings will you receive? How much more will you have? How much will you improve your life? Now, I used a single church in this example, a church that I'm familiar with, a church I used to go to, actually. And I point out their hypocrisy, because that's what it is. And by the way, if you were so inclined, if you'll contact me through givegod90.com, there's a contact page there. I will be happy to provide you with the email address for the church. You can email them yourself. You can contact them yourself. And tell them this is not the way we help people. This is not the way believers are designed to help each other. We're here to lift people up. We don't keep people in a place so we can feel better about ourselves. We don't keep people down so we can lift ourselves up. It just doesn't work like that. You don't lock people in a concentration camp. You don't lock people in a concentration camp. You just don't do it. And I haven't even mentioned the neighbors. They're very close to some neighboring folks who are very upset that this is happening in their backyard. Would you think about it? Do you want to open your curtains in the morning and see a concentration camp? Or do you want to open your curtains in the morning and see people helping people with the help that they really need? The help that's going to encourage them, uplift them, put them in a position that in a day or two, they can be the helper. Think about those things as you go through your week. Think about how we uplift people, how we change people's lives, and how much more you can improve your life if you live the way your Creator designed you to live, and you don't take part in the things that the secular world wants you to take part in. I have gone way past what I intended to go in talking about this. But seriously, we are instructed to help. We're instructed to give people what they need. And that is so often very different than what they want. Think about what you need. It's not always what you want, is it? I think I said this the other night. People like dessert. Sometimes dessert's not good for them. Sometimes what people really need is the meal, not the dessert. Anyway, something to consider as you go through your week. Until Thursday, we appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget those like buttons and share buttons. Till next time, many, many blessings.